This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 421, The Future of Drupal. On today's show, we are talking about the future of Drupal, what challenges Drupal may have, and how we can overcome them together with guest Ricardo Marcelino. We'll also cover Nextjs as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Ricardo. Originally from Portugal, Ricardo is an active promoter of the Drupal community, serving as the president of the Portuguese Drupal Association General Assembly. With over a decade of experience in Drupal, he's been contributing back to the community with code, design, translations, and organizing training and events. Ricardo is also the CEO and founder of OmniBee, a leading digital agency specializing in Drupal solutions for medium to large organizations. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I'm Nick Lapham, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are Mark Casillas, Drupal tech lead at Canopy Studios.
Howdy, howdy, everybody. Or bonjour, I guess I should say, because I'm in Lille.
Yeah, you and Martin are both in Lille, right?
Yep.
Also joining us, John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM. Welcome to the show.
Not from Lille. Pouty face.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. But before I do that, let's say congratulations, Martin. This is your 1 year anniversary of hosting module of the week.
Thanks, Nick. I was kind of wondering about when it was officially going to be a year, but it's been really great. And I've actually had a couple of folks in recent sort of camps and conferences that I've been at come up and tell me how much they appreciate Module of the Week, and so I really feel like it's a great opportunity to share the hard work that I know so many maintainers put into the projects that they maintain.
They're like, you really classed up that show. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah. 52 great modules.
Well, I guess on that note, maybe I should talk a little bit about our module Nextjs, which is a way to build a website with a React-based front end, but with lots of the robust and mature CMS capabilities that Drupal provides. It is a module that was created in January of 2021 by Shad Cien, who continues to support it, including in the Nextjs channel in Drupal Slack. It does have a 1.6.3 version, which works with Drupal 9 and 10, and it is actively maintained, although it uses a GitHub repo as its place for collaboration, including issue management. Speaking of which, there are 135 open issues, 12 of which are bugs, and it does have test coverage. It's officially in use by 1,249 Drupal sites. And for anyone who's not familiar with Nextjs, it's a React framework for building front-end applications that gives developers a number of useful capabilities such as dynamic routing, performance optimizations, integrations, and more. The Nextjs module for Drupal optimizes your Drupal backend site for use as the content repository for a Nextjs front end. It adds functionality like headless preview of unpublished or moderated content, even across multiple front-end apps. Also supports incremental site regeneration, a best practice to ensure your front-end site can serve static pages for the fastest possible delivery, but without the risk of serving stale content. It works with the JSON API menu items and JSON API views Drupal modules to allow even more of your front-end site to be managed within your Drupal backend. There's even a Nextjs web form module that allows your Drupal site to, your Drupal site builder to create web forms and have the React forms automatically generated, which is, I think, a bit of a differentiator from probably some of the other headless CMS options out there. There is also a specialized version of Nextjs, a Next Drupal Basic Starter, also maintained by Shad Cien, that helps to get your Nextjs front end working with Drupal more quickly. So let's talk about the Nextjs Drupal module.
Yeah, it's actually been featured at a couple of days for a couple of years. We talk about it. It's a really good headless alternative for Drupal, and the way they pull in using JSON API and actually get to work with the web forms and the menu items, which when you do something like Gatsby, you kind of have some limitations, but the way that the Next.js module and Next.js work with Drupal, very, very good, good combination in there. So it makes it a little bit more robust as well. Still React, so I'm not a fan, but that's just my ego, not more than anything else. But it is a great headless alternative to the Drupal front end.
And Decoupled Days was in New Mexico this year, correct?
Yeah, a couple months ago in August. First time it was in New Mexico. We came to Albuquerque instead of New York City, mainly because it was really expensive to hold a conference in New York City. I don't know if you've ever done that, but a couple days we did it in Albuquerque. Really well attended, I thought. Hotel Andaluz downtown was a beautiful place, and actually we discussed Next.js there as well.
There you go. I actually have a question for Martin, and he may or may not know the answer to this, but is the Acquia headless CMS using Next.js, the Next.js module, to integrate with the Next.js front end?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Acquia CMS headless starter kit basically adds some, I would say, Acquia specific bits to the the Next.js starter kit, which is really at its core. And even Shad CDN was one of the developers who worked on the headless starter kit for Acquia CMS. So all of it, really coming from, I would say, that same sort of, core set of skills, and Shad CDN as one of the, I think, primary drivers of the Drupal integration here.
One of those great examples of industry helping the community and the community helping industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, just really quickly, without kind of derailing this show too much. What's the advantage of Next.js over React directly? Like, what other things does Next.js itself provide that would make it attractive for a decoupled site?
I think it comes with its own routing engine already embedded. You don't have to write that. It's a framework that already takes care, much like using Drupal takes care of a lot of things out of the box. With using a framework like Next.js or Gatsby, as opposed to writing all that stuff in React yourself, you get it out of the box. So it's just easier to set up. Isn't
it kind of like server orchestration too? Like it does a lot of things behind the scenes with like caching and stuff like that?
Yep. And it automatically knows how to take your JSON API endpoints and set them up as content, as opposed to you having to go and make each call yourself. And that's the difference of using a framework.
Okay, awesome.
So like, if I understand it correctly, Next.js, it's on the node server to help support kind of that effort. And then React is just kind of the front end UI for folks.
Well, so it's, Next.js, React is to Next.js what PHP is to Drupal. It's the language platform.
Right.
So.
I'll maybe quickly add, some of our listeners may have seen a blog post a couple of years back about doing interface translations in Gatsby. I actually got inspired a few months back to make an attempt at porting that over to Next.js. And I would say optimistically, it's maybe 80%. So if there's anybody who's interested in trying to help me get that finished, I feel like decoupled interface translations for Drupal as a headless CMS would potentially be a really strong differentiator. So.
Do you have that on GitHub, or is that a Drupal project?
I do have that on GitHub, yes.
Okay, yeah. Would love to see the link to that.
I'll track you down, Mark.
Just bang on the wall. He's right next door. I'm kidding. He's not right next door.
I'm actually in an Airbnb because I don't trust hotel Wi-Fi. So I went back to the hotel or to my Airbnb. So
got it. Well, Martin, thank you as always for a wonderful module of the week, and thank you for contributing so much to the show for the last year. And enjoy DrupalCon Leo.
Thanks, Nick.
See you next week. Okay, so on to our primary topic. So today's show is actually based on an article written by Ricardo titled "The Future of Drupal." So Ricardo, for listeners who may or may not have read the article when they're listening to the show, it is in the show notes, but can you give us a quick summary of what the article states before we jump in?
Sure. The article was written based on a presentation that I made in the Drupal Day Portugal last month. And when we were planning the Drupal Day, someone asked in the chat if Drupal was dying, and what was the problem of getting hiring people and getting clients and so on. Some of the agencies are seeing a decline on both assets in terms of human resources and also business. And that's something that concerns part of the community. And the goal of the presentation was to address, and we are an open source project, so we should be able to discuss it openly. So that was the goal. So there are three main parts of the presentation. The first one is kind of a review some of the challenges or some of the feedback that we are getting, sometimes from clients, sometimes within the community. The second part is doing like an overview of like look at Drupal as a product and try to see within the web development landscape where Drupal is going. And the third part is more looking forward and try to see what we should do or what we should try at least to do to get Drupal live for 20 more years or something at least. So that's the goal.
That's awesome. And I think the article does do a great job of kind of covering those bases, and hopefully we can kind of dive into some of that here today. I will say one thing that I noticed, your first section is kind of like the challenges, right? Where there could potentially be problems within Drupal for adoption and the path forward. I noticed as part of that section, you kind of show a chart that shows the number of Drupal modules per version, right? And it's pretty interesting to me because Drupal 7 is at 48% modules. Drupal 8 is at 12%. Drupal 9 is at 33%, which is pretty high. And then Drupal 10 only has 2%, right? And like, at first look, you're like, oh, wow, like Drupal 10 seems like it's under-supported, and like it's kind of a little bit alarmist or alarming, I should say, to me at first look. And then if you go back and look at it and think about it a little bit, it then kind of felt maybe a little bit misleading, because most of the Drupal 9 modules would move to Drupal 10, because they're pretty much the same code base, and they're it's a pretty easy migration. Would you tend to agree with that, or am I just misreading the chart?
Yeah, you're right. We need to see the numbers with a grain of salt. Numbers are kind of somehow a little outdated. The session was last month. Right now, Drupal 10 is 3.6% or something. So but it's not that far. Still, it looks a little grim just looking at the numbers. But the numbers only tell us a small story of the size of the ecosystem. While when we were in Drupal 7, there were a larger community maybe with a lot of hobbyists and so on, and a lot of modules, a lot of contrib modules and so on. And so the numbers don't reflect the quality of the modules, so it's not that relevant in that analysis. But it's maybe a sign that we have less people. We have some contributors and maintainers that are picking others modules left by other people, and we have some maintainers with literally dozens of maintaining dozens of modules. And that's a huge effort for them. And there's a strain in resources in some areas. And obviously, I know, and I'm also a maintainer of some projects, that we as a community are doing our best, and we are doing a lot. And I appreciate that everyone that is doing the work and supporting Drupal, obviously. And obviously, I believe in the future of Drupal. But the numbers are numbers that we get back sometimes with. So was Drupal at its peak a few years ago or something? And the trend is kind of similar in other PHP projects. Even the PHP project itself kind of peaked a few years ago. WordPress, you can see the same, and so on. And we can go over some of the detail. The numbers only tell part of the story, and Drupal has a huge community of contributors, but we need to keep attracting people to the ecosystem to try to have it vivid and keep going.
I think some of the thing too is even if it is 2%, it's 2% of the most used modules. I think like if you go to upgrade a site from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, it's rare that you have more than 1 or 2 modules now that need updating. But I'm curious about how you're getting these numbers, because 2% Drupal 10 seems really low.
Now, I was just at the Dries note, here at DrupalCon Lille, and Dries posted up a thing saying that only 3% of the modules are not ready for Drupal 10. So everything else is, and it's a smaller number. So it's kind of a conflicting thing.
Yeah,
but then again, I'm not sure whether those numbers came from him either. So it's very interesting.
From my part, the source is from Drupal.org. So there's the source in the article. I can add it to the show notes as well. So if you go to project module, you'll see all the modules and you can check it there. I don't know. I also saw the session from Dries. Always, it's good news, but I don't know where he got his numbers.
I wonder if the project module is showing only Drupal 10, only modules that are only Drupal 10 and not Drupal 10 and Drupal 9, because that would make sense to me a lot more. But then again, maybe the most used modules really only make up 2 or 3% of the Drupal ecosystem, right? I mean, that's one of the things too. The number of contributed modules sites use is way down over the Drupal 7 years, right? A Drupal 7 site that's moderately complex would have 75 to 100 modules. A moderately complex Drupal 9 or 10 site is going to have 15, 20.
And nobody's really updated any of the modules that are dependent on bad judgment, which was, a module back in Drupal 7 days that people made, just joke modules. And I'm pretty sure those don't have a Drupal 8, 9, or 10 version because
wait,
why?
you mean nobody's upgraded the snow module? So for Drupal 10, that feels like a crime.
I actually wanted to use that module for a demo, and I was like, I'm not going to try to upgrade it. Never mind. So
you should have. So one other aspect of this, right? And module availability is definitely a big piece of this, but I think the other chart that you show is kind of just the adoption and use of Drupal in general, right, over other CMSs. And I think that like you see kind of this maybe starting with Drupal 8 or somewhere around Drupal 9, you see a decrease, right? You start to see a decrease of Drupal adoption. And I'm wondering, and I think we kind of talked about this a little bit early on when we were talking about, answering this question, but I wonder if this is just like a natural evolution and not necessarily a challenge, right? So before we started recording, I was talking about how, Drupal 7, and I think somebody even said this, was like, everybody kind of got onto Drupal 7, right? It was like, oh, this is cool. Like, let's see what this thing does. And I'm going to build my website with this, right? And now we're seeing, Drupal moving towards more of an enterprise solution, more of a, more being more enterprise focused, basically, right? So I'm wondering if this is just like a natural evolution of Drupal as opposed to like something that everybody needs to be fearful of.
Yeah, I think you're right in that Drupal 7 had a lot of people playing with it, and right now there's a more competitive landscape in terms of web development, like all the JS frameworks and so on. There's a lot of stuff there, but I also see a trend, and as a business owner, hiring people that knows Drupal. Most of the people that I interview for a job don't even know what Drupal is, and people from that has a degree in IT, so they know a lot of stuff, but not Drupal. And to get even PHP, it's not being taught in most of the universities here in Portugal, and I assume that's the same all over the world. So it's harder to get people to get someone that knows object-oriented programming to do Drupal. If they know the concepts, they'll be able to do PHP and to learn Drupal. The problem is that sometimes it's harder to convince someone that even though PHP is the king of the web development still, it's most of the web is powered by PHP. It's sometimes hard to get PHP resources, and it's a challenging because it's challenging in terms of the size of the community, and it gets the perception, and the perception is one of our biggest challenges, that Drupal is something old and kind of outdated. And some of our clients also asked us, like, do we have a future? Should we upgrade? And that's something that Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, Drupal 9, that it was some effort to jump between 7 and 8, and 9 is easier, obviously. But that made them reflective. Do we reinvest in Drupal or do we not? Most of the sites that didn't move it to 8 and 9, I think it wasn't that they are not satisfied with Drupal, but most of them are not really that relevant, like the Snow project or something. The business case was something different. And we have a huge installs of Drupal 7, and it decreased because I think the competitive landscape, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that we should still be doing our best to keep driving adoption in the project.
The Dries note, like I said, I'm at DrupalCon Lille, and the Dries note, he went through a very nice fairy tale of the Drupal issues and the possible resolutions. But what do you feel that are some of the other challenges that Drupal face at this point?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, like perception, I think is the biggest challenge. We need to spread the word between human resources and in the marketplace or the overall sector that Drupal is a good framework, and we improve. Like people don't know, most of the people don't know that Drupal 8 and 9 is much more robust than Drupal 7. I think we made a lot of improvements. We have a lot of tools and so on that we didn't at the time. So I think perception is something that we need to work on. In the keynote that you mentioned, the Dries talked about the marketing initiative, and that's something that is important to shape the perception that Drupal has. And because right now I think we try to make Drupal more for enterprises and to be more robust, scalable, but maybe we need to also cater for smaller projects, because even larger organizations has smaller projects. Our bigger clients have like several Drupal projects within, and some of them are quite simple to do, and they try to stick with the same technology for scalability and so on. So there's a point of making Drupal not so cumbersome that it's unusable for smaller projects. And we need to keep having a good solution for bigger projects and more ambitious projects, but we need to have it easy to start kind of for smaller projects, and that's something that a challenge.
I think Drupal, I think you raise an interesting point there, because I think Drupal suffers a little bit from its past, right? And long ago, it was the developer's CMS, right? It was very developer centric, and UI and ease of use kind of suffered a little bit from that, I think. And now, air quotes, modern Drupal, right, has moved into a more we're going to be for the site builder, we're going to be for the ambitious site builder, we're going to be for the enterprise, right? And enterprise really wants kind of like plug and play solutions where it's like, hey, we installed Drupal and we got all of this cool like content layout stuff out of the box, and we got all of this cool like this ability to kind of like auto update out of the box. So you see a lot of, you know, obviously of our current initiatives in the community kind of driving that focus. But I often feel like there are people out there, and you're right, it's a perception thing where they're like, oh, I used Drupal once 5 years ago and it was atrocious. It was so hard to edit content. It was so hard to do this. I had to update it all the time. It was just like we were just throwing money into a hole in the ground and burying it, right? So, you know, I think you're definitely onto something there as far as like, you know, the way that Drupal kind of presents itself now has to change or has to be better. I also think usability has to improve, which I think the community is actually doing a pretty good job of working towards.
Yeah, and I think you know, one thing that the Drupal community and, you know, Dries and in general are doing well is the initiatives I think are uniquely positioned to solve some of these problems. Like I think one of the biggest things that will help with like the small site problem, because I think that's one of the reasons why Drupal 7 had such enormous growth, right? You could use it from the tiniest site to a more complex site. But I think recipes will help a lot with, you know, having like a simple blog use case or event calendar use case or something, and just having, you know, those sites aren't hard to build, but they're still somewhat time consuming. Like you have to install it, you have to, you know, create the content types, create the date field, create the views, style it. Like I think theming is another area where there's a lot of, you know,
exactly.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges is also our stack kind of over or at least have options to be more open to more technologies. And we in the module part we mentioned Nextjs, and we are already implemented several sites with Drupal plus Nextjs, and there's a significant improvement in speed, and there's a lot of solutions that Nextjs found, like the incremental static generation and so on, that works really well. And I don't think we need to like include Nextjs in Drupal. Obviously, that's not the idea, but we should be able to learn with the best in class, and maybe to have like decoupled as a first class citizen, because right now people decoupling. There's a curve. Drupal already has a learning curve, a steep learning curve, but doing decoupling is another one. And I think there's things that we could do better, and we could have, if we are able to have React or front-end technology more easily implemented, I think we would open the doors to a larger audience, because the hiring for example, if I hire a front-end developer, they all know React, but they arrive and they say, okay, now we will work with Twig and plain JavaScript, and it's doable. But the advantages that React brings, and the community, or the amount of people that knows React that could come to the Drupal community, it's an opportunity, that's something that we can look into it.
It's a huge selling point too to companies that are thinking about adopting Drupal, right? That like, hey, you have a bunch of React developers. They don't have to be retrained on how to like build Drupal. They can still work in, you know, with an augmented team or some hybrid team to be able to keep doing what they're doing. You know, I think one of the points that you have here, and we mentioned this, but like finding and retaining talent, I think specifically for Drupal is hard, because as you said, like there aren't a lot of, I mean, I think we have a couple of community members that do a very good job. You know, Mike Anello comes to mind with his training program for Drupal folks, Drupal Easy, right? But I think that like, getting people out of school or out of a training program where they have a ton of Drupal experience and being able to put them into the workplace is not not always as easy as we would like. So, you know, I think that's part of, you know, the issue here. If we can say, hey, you know, Drupal has a new front end theme that's React based, and React developers can just jump into it and start doing their thing. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
that is kind of what single directory components is kind of geared towards, that where it's a component based theming. You're still in Twig. You're not really doing React, you know, but the ideas are the same, where you can actually just componentize your theme, as opposed to it being these ginormous amounts of template files that don't really make sense. So,
well, I think the next evolution there too is, and I haven't seen anybody talk about this, but I'm sure other people have thought about this. But if you can we have the starter kit, we're going to have recipes. If you can make a repository for shareable single directory components, where like that just makes things that much easier to set up. Like, imagine this dream scenario, right? You download Drupal, you pick a couple recipes that adds an event calendar and something, you run the starter kit, and then you go to a components page, choose 10 components, and then you tweak a couple CSS variables to make all the, you know, colors somewhat match. And then maybe you need a little bit of override to make things glue together. Like that just, you know, you still need a developer and somebody that understands the system, right? But that's so much easier than what you need to do today to get one of those simple, you know, couple page landing page websites up and running.
Or maybe the color module makes a reappearance as a contrib module where you can set your colors and you don't have to go into CSS, right? I think one of the things here that I'd like to highlight is that it's almost like Talking Drupal knew that this show was happening, because our last couple of shows have been on recipes and single directory components and moving off of Drupal 7. So listeners, you can go back and listen to all those shows to kind of learn more about what we're talking about here. But getting back on topic, I think like how amazing would that be? And I think we're working towards that, but it's, you know, it's taking time, as things do, right?
Yeah. So kind of moving back to our agenda, you know, what do you think are the things that are still Drupal's kind of unique selling proposition, and how is Drupal different from the other, you know, other frameworks out there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of several things. Like, it's an open source project. That's obviously a thing compared with Adobe and so on, and those stuff. It's very flexible and customizable. We have like a lot of APIs and so on, that it's easy to decouple if you want. Like, kind of easy. We have a lot of modules available, integrations that plug and play, very useful. We have like the ability to create database models with field UI, and I also really enjoyed the demo that they showed today in the keynote, improving on the field UI. And we are very good at multilingual accessibility, and we have a lot of people with experience in large projects, and large and ambitious projects with complex workflows and so on. And I think the combination of those features is something that makes Drupal a very robust solution for a lot of people. And I think it has a lot of differentiators from other things. And in the tail that Dries mentioned, like he mentioned, Nextjs and React and so on. And there are challenges there, and he mentioned Contentful and so on. And the thing is that there are things that they are doing better, and I think that the point of Dries was actually that one, that we should. They don't have perfect solutions, but we should learn from what they have better than us and try to bring. And but I think Drupal is a very robust solution, and I think we can improve it, obviously, but we are, I think, a very good product in terms of marketplace.
So we've mentioned relevance a couple of times, and we talked about expanding into other technologies. We talked about React and Nextjs, and I always consider Drupal as kind of like the glue for a lot of platforms, because it has an ability to connect to a lot of different things and connect a lot of different things. I'm wondering, like, how do you think Drupal can expand its relevance, right? So we want to try to build that relevance. How can it do that? What are some paths it can take?
Yeah, I think one thing that I mentioned in my presentation was like the virtuous cycle of relevance. And basically, if you have like if you have a better product, it will give you more awareness because people will want to try it and will share it and so on. And if we have more users, we'll have economic impact. People will be able to get jobs and get business or work within Drupal, and that will get those resources to innovation and build a better product, and that better product will increase the relevance and so on. So basically, I think it's a cycle that we need to try to move forward. And I think right now we are kind of seeing it might look like it's decreasing. We are spiraling down, but we already mentioned it. I think it's more a perception issue, and I think we'll need to try to reach more people, and like we already also mentioned, and to try to improve the product by cleaning maybe outdated things. Drupal made a very courageous step between 7 and 8 to that. Well, obviously arguable, but to try to cut with the procedural PHP and try to be a more organized framework. And we need those jumps, and we need to be brave enough to sometimes clean or deprecate things that we don't use. And Chris also mentioned this in previous keynotes, to make the Drupal more linear in terms of code, try to remove duplications. Color was one of that was removed, and I think we still need to make it slimmer, more elegant, and at the same time try to put more resources and be more strategic where we want to go, and to try to have more feature improvements, or try to improve the areas that we know that will bring more people. And I think the user experience and builder experience is something that will make Drupal more accessible to more people, and the editorial experience will also give Drupal a better perception, and that will bring more people, and will make the cycle spin in our favor.
In that respect, are the goals of widening the relevance, what will that do to make Drupal better? Are you looking for more developers in Drupal, or are you looking for more user base in Drupal, more sites in Drupal? What is your goal in widening this relevance?
Again, relevance, I think if we are more relevant, we'll be able to reach more people and help more people using Drupal. Drupal is a very powerful tool, and if people don't know Drupal, they won't use it. And I think that's something that it won't be for all projects. So it's not a one-fit-all solution, but we should at least have a very robust project that people will know that, yeah, if I want something complex and open source and so on, Drupal is something that I go. And that's something that I would like to see, is if you are able to keep growing our community and to keep reaching more people and increase or improve our perception. I think even if we don't have more usage per se, and I think usage will also take off. I think at least it will be awareness that Drupal is an option, and I think that's important to keep the community going as well.
I got a bigger, well, maybe a different version of that same question, right? That just kind of came to mind, right? So we want to expand relevance. We want to make Drupal relevant to a larger group of people, right? But like, how do we do that against things like Adobe Experience Manager and Sitecore, right? Because I mean, that's really what we're talking about. And like, I mean, I guess to an extent WordPress, but like, you know, if Drupal is shifting towards the enterprise, right? The enterprise is looking at Adobe Experience Manager, the enterprise is looking at Sitecore. I wonder, like, how do we make Drupal relevant to people that are looking at those solutions?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of things that we can do to do it. I think Drupal has like an advantage, several advantages, as we mentioned, like the open source and so on. They are selling arguments kind of to the organization. But I think that if we improve or make easier to have more recent technologies within, I think it would be something that we could it would be easier to sell the project to the large companies, and we don't have like licenses and so on, so that, and more than the licenses, there's no vendor lock-in. If you have Drupal, you own your infrastructure, your structure, your platform or whatever. So I think there are a lot of things that Drupal does better than Adobe and so on. Adobe has a lot of features in terms of media management, AI, and so on. Now,
Yeah.
And I think we still need to push Drupal to have the best experience possible to compete. But yeah, they will be a closed gate solution. So, and we need to be the best open solution.
I think those are all great points, and points that I tend to hit on myself when trying to compare them. I think costs, right? Licensing costs is a big one. Like Drupal's not free, obviously. We all know that. Like there's hosting costs and implementation costs. But one area I think that makes it a little bit more difficult, and I think Acquia is doing a pretty good job with Widen to try to combat this, is integration to asset managers, right? So like obviously Acquia acquired Widen, and they have the Acquia Dam now, which is great, but like there are also other asset managers out there that a lot of times they'll say, yeah, we integrate with Drupal. And then you'll go and look at like D.O, and you'll be like, well, your module either hasn't been upgraded in 5 years, or it's really just like proprietary internal stuff that you guys do to make it work, right? So, I think you're right on there with like, hey, let's bring those people into the community, and then like say, hey, there's a benefit to you, building a module here and maintaining a module here, because like this could be a good solution for your customer base.
Yeah, we always have several stakeholders in the process, like the client, our development team, or there are a lot of people involved, and we need to basically to have the best return on investment for them. So we'll need to have a solution, and it's not only the cost of the licensing fee or whatever, like the running cost and so on. We'll need to return good value for what we are doing, and I think Drupal has that ability. Like there are several solutions, and this is a challenging for open source overall, is the part of the funding open source and funding innovation. And I think that's something that Acquia has been pushing towards, like pushing Drupal, and we need more people also pushing. And there are obviously several other companies doing great job. And we just mentioned Nextjs that was made for, I think, Chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. And there are a lot of them. And I think, but there are a lot of bigger companies, even like consultants and so on, that use Drupal often and widely without returning anything. And that's a challenge that we have. Like we want to have resources to be able to develop the product. And the solution is not for each of us to have a media management tool or whatever. The community should have a good editorial experience, a good media manager, and a good layout builder, and so on. And that's one of the weaker points right now, I think, in Drupal, is the editorial experience. And a lot of companies are trying to find their own solution, and that's comprehensible. But I would prefer that Drupal itself would have a better solution for all of us.
Yeah, and there's a few different places that these can be contributed to. I mean, we're a big proponent on the show of non-code contributions, but even if you're talking about code or functionality things, there's a few different places that these contributions can happen. One is bug fixes, right? If there's a bug that's affecting stuff, We all know that there's bugs in Drupal core and patches for those, but getting those across the finish line, that takes resources. One of the things that really struck me recently with some of the discussions that, with some of the things that got into 10.1 and 10.2 is sometimes rethinking old things, like adding like some of the things that they've done with exposing the information on the content type field page, like just makes it so much more useful. But it takes resources and thought to figure out where those fixes can happen. And then, of course, the final place is just greenfield or blue sky thinking, like, what are the things that we need to do to also stand out in the future? Layout Builder was one of those that's now a couple of years old. Single directory components, I think, was catching up in some respect. But there's kind of those three areas, and it's hard to, if you don't have the resources, I think they get put in that order, right? Bug fixes, let's fix what we have. Then, those additional UX tweaks, like let's tweak what we have, and then let's build something new. You really need a lot of resources to invest in brand new things that will really make you stand out in the market. How does the Drupal project as a whole and the community as a whole advocate for those types of investments, whether it's time from agencies or cash from agencies? How do you think as a community we start making that a reality?
Well, I think the way we can always try to ask or try to make training sessions and hire and try to bring new people to the project. I think it's hard to get resources where you don't have it, where there's not. So basically, I think there are a lot of things that we've been doing, and you're trying to mention like some catch-up that we are doing, like the layout builder is a few years old. Media was a big improvement for a few. It was released a few years ago and still kind of the same. And there are initiatives that were kind of abandoned, like the JavaScript initiative, modernization initiative, was kind of put aside, and that I think is caused by the lack of resources and the way we won't be able to invent resources where there's not. And I think we can ask people to contribute more with code or money or whatever, but I think more than that, we'll need to use what we have, and that's the kind of one of the messages of the presentation was we need to be strategic regarding what we have with resources that we have. And it's more a community coordination issue, try to have to go towards a common goal that is better for all. And if we do that, I think Drupal will be more relevant and we will have more resources, like investment towards getting more resources ahead. So right now we need probably to invest our small or not that large resources in things that I think affect them the most, the majority of people, I think.
Yeah, that kind of leads to the question of what do you feel would be the next step in Drupal? Is it trying to be more enterprise, trying to be a general CMS, or just stick to its stay in its lane with content modeling? What do you feel is next?
Well, I think there are several possible time references. So I think in the short term or in the medium term, I think we should strive to improve the product. And the good news is that we are doing that with strategic initiatives like the kind of the Shark Tank that we had in Pittsburgh. I think there are a lot of there are projects, not blooming projects that are appearing, and they reflect the need of the market. So that's good news. But I think still we need to bring more things and bring more. And there are a lot of things also in the contrib, and there are a lot of modules. Like last week you had here like the preview, the same page preview, something like that. Yep. Really nice module that I wasn't aware, and it was a nice way to find that out. And I think what we need to do in the short term, I think it's make things incrementally better. And I think, for example, like as I mentioned, the decouple is important. I think it's important, and I see that even if medium-sized projects will be able to leverage decoupled and will be able to bring more people, as I already mentioned, and so on. I think in the short term, we also should be able to check for AI, and there are some nice experiments with AI to search, categorize, and so on. And I think this is a thing that won't go back. We won't put it back on the box. So I think we need to leverage it, and our competition will also do it. So we need to have that. And in the long term, I think we should consider what Drupal is better. We should aim for a magical experience in terms of just works, right? Like, and we should have that experience. But if we want to do very customizable thing, we should be able to do it. But it's to have some assumptions at the beginning to make things faster for people that come to the project, and then allow to grow in complexity or scalability or whatever.
So I'm wondering, we talked about kind of a lot here as far as where the challenges are for Drupal. At the beginning of the show, we talked about kind of like, hey, there's a downturn in Drupal adoption, right? And from where I sit, or at least my opinion here is that, like, a lot of smaller organizations, a lot of nonprofit organizations, educational institutions could be moving away from Drupal. There are surely plenty moving towards Drupal, but there are some moving away from Drupal, and I imagine that's largely due to funding, right? So we talked to the Backdrop CMS folks a couple of shows ago, and we were kind of talking about that move. I'm wondering if you feel like if that's a natural shift for Drupal, and as it moves from kind of that kind of like general CMS that everybody kind of wants to play with to more of an enterprise tool. And is there anything that you think Drupal can do to kind of maybe combat that? And I think we talked a lot about it, making it more accessible and making it easier to install. But I'm wondering if it necessarily needs to.
Well, I think Drupal is not for all projects, as I mentioned. So even WordPress, as it's kind of more user friendly, is being like all the software as a service services like Wix and so on that Chris also mentioned. They provide a no frills experience. People can click, start, have a website, and it's done. So depending on what you want to do, there are things that can help you and can remove some pain from the process, right? But there are things that we could improve, and I think, for example, Webflow is like a CMS as well, but it's a software as a service CMS that has content types and so on. It has some similarities with Drupal, and that's something that we could easily have a similar nice experience for builders than they have. And obviously, there's the problem of open source funding, and obviously they have larger pockets maybe, but I think we won't be able to go to all projects, but I think Drupal should be a viable option for someone that wanted to build a smaller project but wanted to own the project. Shouldn't be like an impossible task to spin up a Drupal website and build something quickly. I think we should have like assumptions to, if you want, and we kind of do, but I think we can do it better. Like create the project, deploy easily, and up and running.
It's interesting because I often think like, so, I early on in my career, I was like, Drupal for everybody. Everybody gets Drupal. Like Drupal's great. And granted, that was more along the Drupal 7, frame timeline, right? Where I was like, oh, like we need this small site, Drupal can do that. Oh, we need this big site, Drupal can do that, right? I definitely agree with your standpoint of now I'm kind of like, well, you could go to Squarespace and like that would be fine. And you would get your hosting and your platform and everything all in one place, and like it would solve your problem, and like it would be pretty low cost, right? I think I brought this up to maybe Nick and Steven in our Talking Drupal chat a couple months ago. I was like, there should be like a Drupal, like a Squarespace version of Drupal, right? Where you can go and say like, or like, I think WordPress does this with they have a kind of like a hosted version of WordPress, right? I'm like, I feel like somebody should develop a company where that's a thing. Like, hey, you get Drupal and it's like, managed by this company, and then you get a certain set of features and so on and so forth. But like, I definitely agree with the picture you're painting is like Drupal's not for everybody, but Drupal should be accessible to everybody, right? Which I think is important. Like if you want to install Drupal and you want to own it and you want to do your thing, like you should definitely be able to do that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But depending on what your use case is, it might not fit the bill. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and one thing that we can also improve is improving the out-of-the-box experience is something important, but we should also, if we bring tools from outside, for example, if we had like a React, to be able to use React or other front-end library, we will be able to use components that are already made, like the example that Nick mentioned with the single site components already exists in React. So you could already go and pick a UI kit and build the whole website with a graphic quality to it with some ease. And I think one thing that people on the Webflow side really enjoys is that they can copy paste from other websites, and like, I want that slideshow. You go there, copy, paste into the other project, and then you have a style and you can change the variations and so on. And I think that editorial experience in Drupal it's a little harder. And if we open ourselves more to the environment, maybe we would be able to leverage those magical things on our side.
Yeah. So I apologize in advance for putting this all on your shoulders, but Ricardo, if you had complete control and there was one thing you could do to ensure the future of Drupal, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I think that the two main things that we need to consider is to improve the build process, kind of. The build process, it's the developer experience plus the site builder's experience and so on. It's the whole process that we need to build. But I think I would be able to see a future where React would power both backend and the front end. And obviously this is very far-fetched and this is obviously very controversial, but I think Drupal is a very robust backend solution. As a front end, it's not our biggest selling proposition. So yeah, I think it's kind of the weakest part of Drupal. And I think that could be a thing. And I think if we combine that with new approaches, and for example, that I mentioned, we could learn, like, instead of the caching that we have, having the static assets being built like the Nextjs is doing or whatever, or doing things differently. Obviously, there are a lot of things here, and I think the change we'll make if the community we as individuals in the community try to push for things and do things and not only talk but also do. And I think that will be the future of Drupal, is all of us trying to push things forward. And while criticizing Drupal, we are not disliking it. It's like our son. We care for him and we want him to be better, and we'll criticize if needed, and we'll try to make it grow and try to make it a better and more robust or future-proof, and that's what we want. So everyone try to chip in with code, ideas, documentation, challenges. Yeah.
I think you said it best, and I'm going to quote you to you here. You say the future of Drupal depends on each of us. We all have a role to play in shaping the platform's continued success, and I think that's really, the message here. I mean, among other things, right? Like, if we want Drupal to succeed, we all have to, we all have to be able to jump in and contribute and push it forward and make these things that we talked about today a reality.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the main goals of our talk in Drupal Day Portugal, was to try to bring awareness to the need of being part of the process. So Drupal won't build itself. Drupal, it's like the village, as Teresa mentioned. We all need to create better tools to build our buildings and to have a more robust set of tools. Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of open source, right? If you have something that's really important to you, you can work on that. Whereas if it's SaaS like Webflow, you really don't have any leverage to customize something other than what the tools are, the tools that are provided to you.
I thought the Dresno did a really good job of capturing the villainous creatures of Webflow and Adobe and all the other ones that it did. If you haven't seen the keynote yet, please, it is very entertaining. I think he should have had a bunch of kids sitting there while he read the fairy tale, but that's just my creative thinking. So
I have not watched yet. I will check that out.
I really can't wait to watch that.
Well, Ricardo, thank you for joining us. It was great having you on to talk about this.
Thank you very much for talking with me. Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I've been hearing your podcast for years now, and it's a pleasure to be part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter. Learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. Okay, Ricardo, we are at the end of the show. If our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm in Drupal.org. Ricardo Marcelino, it's always the same handler. So for X and so on. So and I'm in Slack, in Drupal Slack. So if you need me, it's always a pleasure to exchange ideas.
Awesome. And Mark, how about you?
I am Marky on Drupal Slack and Drupal.org. If you want me on the Twitters, I am Drunken Drupal there. Also, you featured my band's Facebook account last time, so I'm going to say we have an Instagram account too. That's the Random Addicts there.
And John, how about you?
I am at John Picozzi on all the major social networks and Drupal.org. And you can find out more about EPAM at epam.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for playing.